Arise and go your way. Your faith has made you well. Several years ago, an older woman at the church where I previously served had given us a generous gift. But after she gave it, she said, "And don't send a thank you note." Now, why did she say this? Because she didn't want something given just out of mere obligation. But I delightfully disobeyed. And the reason for that was not because I became more thankful by sending the note. I would have been thankful either way. But by following up, returning to her, so to speak, I furthered the relationship, and that relationship was life-giving. And so we have a passage today of 10 lepers who were healed, and only one came back to give thanks to Jesus. And so this seems like it's a lesson about gratitude, and it is on many levels. But it's more than that. At a more deeper level, it's really about a relationship. And so, what about the other 9? Were they not grateful? Actually, it doesn't say they weren't grateful. They just didn't return. In fact, they went to the temple because Jesus told them to. That was prescribed in the Old Testament law in the book of Deuteronomy. Show yourself to the priest in order to be declared ritually clean so they could return to the temple and interact with God's people. I'm sure they were thankful, and so they would have also been thankful to be able to return to their families. Then it says, now the one who came back. What is different about the one who came back? It says the one who came back was a Samaritan. So initially he went away like the rest of them. Did he go all the way to the temple with them? If so, he wouldn't have had full access to the temple because he was a Samaritan. He was a foreigner, and so he wouldn't have been able to, he would have been able to perhaps show himself to the priests, but he would not have been quite as at home there. Perhaps he went to the mountain where the Samaritans worshipped and visited his own priests. It doesn't say. But we do know this, is that it would have been easier for the other 9, presumably Jews, to be more at home at the temple, more content there. They would have been accepted, and they would have been closer to their families. But perhaps that contentedness, perhaps that comfort that they experienced, made them blind to seeing something more. So why did the Samaritan come back to Jesus? Because he knew the source of life, a source that was even greater than the temple, a source that preceded the temple, and that was in the person of our Lord Jesus Christ. God became man who would come into the world and would lead ultimately to the redemption of the cross. Now, he would not have known how this redemption would have been played out, but he saw already that he had the marks of the Messiah. And so he comes and he falls down on his face before Jesus. Now, in the ancient Near East, that is what you do before kings. So he recognizes, what's more, is that Jesus is the true king who has come into the world. And he goes and he by his actions shows, I will obey you. That is a deepening of a relationship. So what's wrong with the other 9? They did their duty. They went to the temple as the law prescribed. But then Jesus says, where were the other 9? Was no man found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? Now, truly, they probably did thank God in the temple, but only the Samaritan came to God in the form of our Lord Jesus Christ, as he was revealed in a greater way that trumps even the temple worship. And so here we are. We have come to meet Jesus in the Mass, the temple, so to speak. And we come in the context of the Eucharist, and the word Eucharist in Greek simply means thanksgiving. So one response that we could have today might be, well, sure, I'm glad we're not like those other 9. But sometimes, don't we approach the Mass like those other 9 lepers as a mere duty? Going to Mass is a duty. It's part of our church law. We call it the holy day of obligation. And so when we come, we're obeying, much like the temples who went to the temple according to the words of Deuteronomy. But is there not a time when we occasionally have that similar mentality? I've done what I was told to do. And like them, even when you have this mentality, you can still be thankful. But we can also come like the Samaritan. When do you come to Jesus like the Samaritan? With that sense of urgency, throwing yourself on your face before the Lord. If not literally, at least internally. Are you seeking and cultivating that relationship with the one who is the King of Kings, the Lord of your life? If you do, then the response to you is like Jesus to the Samaritan, where he says, "Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well." In the Greek, that word rise is the same word from which we derive the word resurrection. And the first readers of this gospel would have recognized that connection. So yes, the 9 followed mere duty, and they certainly may have done so with gratitude. But that Samaritan chose something more. By falling on his face before the Lord, he chose a relationship with our Lord Jesus Christ. And Jesus says that is a saving faith. That where our translation says, "Your faith has made you well." Another translation is, "Your faith has saved you." That saving faith is a healing faith. And so this is something that we do when we come to the Eucharist, a whole action, everything imbued with thanksgiving. But after we're healed at the Mass, that relationship continues. As St. Alphonsus Liguori wrote, "There's no prayer more agreeable to God or more profitable to the soul than that which is made during the thanksgiving after communion." Because we could say that continues that relationship, which is a life of thanksgiving, a life of throwing ourselves before the Lord, saying, "I need you," and living before the Lord of Lords. So as we approach the Eucharist today, may each of us examine our heart. Let's identify how, by being content with following mere duty, and by just being content by being with what's familiar, we can become blind ourselves to the source of life. Then internally, may each of us fall on our face before the Lord. And then Jesus will say to you anew, "Arise, go your way, your faith has made you well."